It was a hot and sunny day in the south of France. And on the surface, we must have looked like the perfect young family. We lived in a beautiful market town amidst rolling vineyards. The money poured in from my business. We owned 2 properties. We owned 2 cars. We had 2 beautiful daughters and a cute dog. But on that hot and sunny day in the south of France, I was a shaking wreck. You see, my wife had asked me to put some shelves up in the sitting room. A simple job, you might think, but I'm rubbish at DIY. And we both knew that she was setting me up to fail, because either I suggested we get someone else in to do the work, but she'd have been disappointed that I wasn't trying to better myself like the other real men that we knew, and her disappointment generally led to rage and violence, where she'd bite me, kick me, grab at my face with her sharp nails, and punch me. And she had a hell of a punch. She floored me completely on a number of occasions. Or maybe I could just man up and do the work myself. But when I made a mess of it, as I generally did with DIY projects, my stomach would be churning with fear because I'd know what was coming next. Disappointment followed by rage and violence. That was the pattern. So on that hot and sunny day in the south of France, I'm doing my best with these damn shelves, but things are going wrong. There are holes in the wall for my drilling, but they're not lining up. I'm making a mess. I'm starting to panic. And suddenly she's here. She's inspecting the work, and she is not happy with what she sees. She skips a disappointment bit this time. She heads straight to rage. She's shouting and screaming about my ineptitude. I'm begging, I'm pleading. Look, I'm sorry. I'll start again. I'll do a better job next time. She grabs a pencil I just sharpened and stabs me repeatedly in the forearm. I feel the sharp pain. I can see the blood pouring out. I'm feeling sick. And from nowhere, like my guardian angel, our English neighbor bursts through our unlocked front door. She's heard the shouting and screaming. She persuades my wife to go next door with her to calm down. And later that evening, that neighbor said to me, "Andrew, you do realize this is domestic abuse." As crazy as this may sound, I'd endured 7 years of this, and not once had I ever considered myself to be the victim of domestic abuse, and yet my wife had poured chaos and fear into my life from the very beginning of our relationship. She had bizarre and unpredictable mood swings, so I'd never know what was coming next or what might provoke her. She'd threaten me with knives. She'd attack me with anything that she could lay her hands on, such as the half-filled metal watering can, which she slammed into my ribs, or the candlestick, which she slammed over my head. She'd talk and talk about suicide, about her childhood, allegedly full of abuse, about her many illnesses, and there were many apparent illnesses: hepatitis C, bronchitis, anorexia, a brain tumor the size of an orange, even staged heart attacks. And of course, I now realize that this was all done to turn me into her worried and attentive carer. And she manipulated my relationships, particularly those with close family and friends, in order to isolate me from any possible wake-up call or network of support. My wife was a skilled puppeteer, and she pulled my strings in all directions till I was too dizzy to think straight. You know, I honestly believed it was all my fault, that if I didn't keep provoking her, then she wouldn't keep getting mad at me, and the violence would stop. And I felt so ashamed that for all the self-help books and counseling sessions that I consumed, I never could find the magic answer for how to be that better husband who didn't provoke his wife, for how to be that better husband who deserved love and respect. Shame is a terrible thing, you know. It's an effective silencer. You won't speak out if you feel ashamed about something, and let's face it, in a world of manning up and who wears the trousers, no self-respecting man is going to willingly admit to being knocked about by his wife. So you're probably all thinking, well, why didn't you leave? You could have just walked out the door. But leaving isn't as simple as it sounds, because abusers rob you of your confidence, your optimism, and your support networks, so that when you're in it, you can't really see beyond it. You're just surviving day by day. You're just working overtime to prevent your abuser's triggers from being pulled. And then, of course, there's the children. We had 2 daughters together. If I leave, I knowingly leave my daughters in the hands of an abusive person. What loving father's going to do that? And of course, if I leave, I have to accept that I'm going to see far less of my daughters moving forward, as my wife will no doubt use my desire to see my daughters as a weapon against me, to help her take back control of the situation and to take revenge on me for having had the audacity to have walked away. That fear of not seeing your children, that fear is what keeps fathers trapped for years in abusive relationships. And then, if I leave, there's also the fear of facing false accusations of domestic abuse. And I'll give you an example. So, when I faced my ex-wife in the family courts after we got divorced, she requested a screen in court due to her alleged fear of me, citing years of domestic abuse. And then, as someone who was representing herself in court, she pushed and pushed the judge to allow her to personally cross-examine me. How could she be so afraid of me on the one hand that she's requesting a screen in court, and yet so confident of herself on the other hand that she was absolutely determined to personally cross-examine me? You couldn't make it up. And although I can laugh today about the absurd nature of that contradiction, at the time, can you imagine how distressing it was for me to be the only man in that courtroom of women, facing false allegations of domestic abuse, and then to be aggressively cross-examined by my female abuser for about an hour? Can you imagine how distressing that was? Men are suffering in silence, and society is not helping because society generally assumes that when it comes to domestic abuse, it's women and children who are going to suffer. A couple of months ago, the BBC ran an article about the number of domestic violence-related murders in the UK having reached a 5-year high. And the headline image that they used for that article was 6 photographs of 6 faces of 6 tragically murdered women. Now, I've blurred out their faces out of respect to the families of those women. But my point is that in the article, the BBC state that 75% of domestic violence-related murder in the UK involves women as victims, leaving 25% involving men as victims. So don't you think that a headline image which accurately portrays the true face of domestic violence-related murder in the UK, it would have had 8 photographs, wouldn't it? 6 women and 2 men. Do the maths. Domestic abuse, where men are the victims, is far more common than you may think. In fact, in the UK last year, of the 2 million reported cases of domestic abuse, 1/3 involved men as victims. And 1 in 6 men in the UK will experience domestic abuse at some point in their lifetime. Now, looking around this fabulous venue today, there must be 100 men here. I wonder how many of you can truly identify with some of the experiences that I'm describing. If we're serious about tackling domestic abuse, if we're serious about protecting our daughters and our sons, then we need to accept an uncomfortable truth, which is that women also abuse. Women abuse women. Women abuse men. Men abuse men. Men abuse women. Domestic abuse is not a man versus woman issue. It's a human issue. And we need to start thinking about it and talking about it as a human issue if we're serious about tackling it. We need to take a step change in our approach towards domestic abuse. And the very first step is to encourage women and men who have been abused to come forward with their stories, to be acknowledged, to be heard, so we can learn from them and truly understand the causes and signs of domestic abuse, so we can look out for one another. And so we can truly understand the challenges faced by female and male victims of domestic abuse, so we can empower women and men to leave the horrors of abuse behind them and move forward to rebuild their lives. Now, I'm one of the lucky ones. I got to rebuild my life. I'm now blissfully remarried to a wonderful woman. She lights up my world. She's brilliant. My 2 daughters got moved to us by the courts in an extraordinary legal case. and we have 3 joyful young boys, and it's my privilege to serve people at all levels of society, including men struggling with abuse. And I'm now at peace about what happened because I've chosen to forgive. Now, some people choose to forgive because they want to set themselves free. But that wasn't the case for me, because I actually quite liked feeling bitter and angry for a while. My bitterness was like a comfy pair of joggers, and I didn't want to take them off. But bitter people make stupid decisions because bitterness is an all-consuming black hole. And when you're spinning around in the darkness, you can't see clearly, you won't make rational decisions. Now, I didn't want to make stupid decisions. I wanted to make good decisions, smart decisions. And so for that reason, I trained myself over time to see every situation which involved my ex-wife, not through the eyes of a bitter victim, but through the eyes of a wise and external observer, detached from the raw emotion. And as I made that my habit, I started to see 2 people. I started to see a broken woman in pain, struggling with mental health issues, and a naive young man who thought he could mend that broken woman by standing with her over time. But when I chose to see it like that, it was easier to forgive. Now, there's 2 things I'd say to you if you're caught in an abusive relationship. The first is talk to someone you trust, your brother, your neighbor, your colleague, your friend. But don't suffer in silence due to shame, pride, or fear. And know that just because you're caught in an abusive relationship, it doesn't mean you're weak or stupid. Anyone can get caught in an abusive relationship. And you will have shown incredible strength, hanging in there day after day as you do. And the second thing I'd say to you is that better is possible for you. The grass really is greener on the other side of the hill. So never lose hope and never give up. Thank you.